The harsh glare of the operating room lights reflected off the stainless steel instruments. The air was thick with tension, the steady beeping of the heart monitor filling the silence between the surgeon's clipped commands. Nurse Sarah Roberts had been in dozens of critical situations before, but nothing about this moment felt routine. The man on the table, a middle-aged father too, was losing his fight. BP dropping fast, one of the anesthesiologists shouted, eyes glued to the monitor. The numbers were falling, a red digital countdown of a life slipping away. Dr. Myers, the lead surgeon, cursed under his breath. We're losing him. Clamp here, more suction. Sarah's gloved hands moved swiftly, almost mechanically, as she passed instruments and adjusted the flow. But her mind was racing. She'd been trained to stay calm, to follow the chain of command. Still, something about the patient's condition didn't match the notes in his chart. She glanced at the medication list. Something's wrong, she thought. A detail from earlier in the day flashed back, an allergy the patient had mentioned to her during pre-op, a detail that hadn't been entered into the electronic record yet. The heart monitor's beeping grew erratic, each gap between sounds stretching like an eternity. We're flatlining. For a split second, Sarah froze. She could feel the pounding of her own heartbeat in her ears, louder than the alarms now screaming in the room. Every eye was on Dr. Myers, but he looked unsure, caught between standard procedure and the unknown. And then Sarah made a decision that would stun every doctor in the room. She broke protocol. She reached for something on the tray. Sarah's fingers closed around a small vial of epinephrine. Her training screamed at her to wait for the doctor's order. But the patient's lips were turning blue, and the flat line on the monitor was screaming louder than any rule book. "Sarah, what are you doing?" one of the residents barked, his voice cracking with panic. "I'm saving him," she said, her tone calm but sharp enough to cut through the chaos. In one swift motion, she prepared the injection and delivered it straight into the foreline. The room went silent for a fraction of a second, then erupted. "That's against protocol," another nurse gasped. Dr. Myers' head snapped toward her, eyes blazing. "You'd better be right, Roberts." Sarah didn't flinch. She knew the patient's allergic reaction was triggering the collapse. She'd seen it once before in her early career, and she'd sworn never to miss the signs again. The allergy had been overlooked, and if she waited for permission, it would be too late. The monitor stayed flat. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. The tension in the air was suffocating. Then beep. It was faint at first, just a single blip on the screen. Then another, then a weak but steady rhythm. Gasps rippled through the room. The patient's chest began to rise more evenly, color creeping back into his cheeks. Dr. Myers stood frozen, scalpel in hand, watching as the impossible unfolded right in front of him. "I don't believe it," he muttered. Sarah simply exhaled, her shoulders loosening just slightly. "Believe it," she said. "Now let's finish saving him." The room moved again, but now with a different kind of urgency, controlled, focused. Dr. Myers signaled for everyone to resume. "All right, let's get back in. We still got a long way to go." Sarah kept her eyes on the monitor as she adjusted the flow, making sure the patient's vitals stayed steady. Her mind replayed the moment she'd injected the epinephrine. If she'd hesitated even 3 more seconds, the outcome could have been very different. The resident who had snapped at her earlier avoided eye contact, his face pale. One of the scrub nurses leaned toward her and whispered, "You just saved his life." Sarah didn't respond. She wasn't looking for praise. She was looking for confirmation that the patient would pull through. Every beep of the heart monitor felt like a promise she wasn't ready to trust yet. An hour later, the surgery ended. The patient's blood pressure had stabilized, and the doctors began closing the incision. As they worked, Sarah quietly updated the chart, adding the critical allergy note in bold red letters, so it would never be missed again. When the patient was wheeled into recovery, the team began peeling off gloves and masks. The usual post-op chatter was replaced with a thick silence. Dr. Myers approached her. "You went against direct orders today," he said, voice low but firm. "If that hadn't worked, you'd be facing disciplinary action, maybe even losing your license." Sarah met his gaze. "If it hadn't worked, we'd be planning a funeral instead." His expression softened just slightly. You took a hell of a risk, but you were right. Sarah sat in the break room afterward, hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee. She wasn't drinking. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving a hollow exhaustion in its place. She could still hear the shrill alarm of the flatline in her ears. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from the patient's wife. "Please, tell me he's okay." Sarah stared at the message, her throat tightening. She couldn't give a definitive answer yet. The man was in critical care, and the next 24 hours would decide everything. Still, she typed back, "He's alive. He's fighting." The door swung open, and Dr. Myers stepped in. He didn't say anything at first, just poured himself coffee and sat across from her. "I checked with ICU," he finally said. "He's holding steady." Relief washed over her, but it was quickly followed by the weight of what had just happened. "You know I didn't do it to challenge you," she said quietly. "I know," he replied. "You saw something the rest of us didn't. That's rare." Before Sarah could answer, the hospital administrator appeared in the doorway. "Nurse Roberts, I need to see you in my office." The tone was flat, unreadable. Sarah stood, heart sinking. She'd known this moment was coming. Life in a hospital meant every action had a paper trail, and she had broken a rule that could end her career. As she followed the administrator down the hallway, she passed the ICU. Through the glass, she saw the patient, breathing alive. His wife sat at his bedside, holding his hand, tears streaming down her face. That sight gave Sarah the strength to keep walking. The administrator's office was quiet, the blinds drawn against the harsh afternoon sun. A single folder sat on the desk, her incident report. Sarah sat down, her palms pressed against her knees to keep them from shaking. The administrator, Mrs. Grant, didn't waste time. "Nurse Roberts, your actions today bypassed medical hierarchy and violated standing protocol. That cannot be ignored." Her voice was calm, but every word carried weight. Sarah nodded. "I understand. I made a call based on a life-threatening allergy that wasn't in the record yet. If I had waited, he'd be dead." Mrs. Grant studied her for a long moment. "You've been here 8 years. Your record is spotless. But you know what could happen if a nurse takes such actions without authorization." "I do," Sarah said. "And I'd do it again if it meant a patient had a chance to live." The silence stretched. Sarah braced herself for the worst. Suspension, maybe even termination. Instead, Mrs. Grant closed the folder. "Dr. Myers has already spoken to me. He said you saw something he missed. He called it extraordinary." Sarah blinked. "He did." Mrs. Grant gave a small nod. "You'll receive a written warning in your file, but you're keeping your position." Relief flooded her, but she didn't smile. There was no triumph in what happened, only the knowledge that a man was still breathing because she'd listened to her instincts. As she left the office, she thought about the moment she'd broken the rules. It hadn't been bravery, she realized. It had been something deeper, an unshakable refusal to stand by and watch someone die when she could act. That evening, Sarah walked quietly into the ICU. The machines hummed softly, their lights casting a gentle glow across the room. The patient lay resting, his breathing steady, his face no longer pale and drawn. His wife looked up and spotted Sarah. Without a word, she stood and walked toward her, tears welling again, but this time they were tears of relief. She threw her arms around Sarah, whispering, "Thank you. I don't know what you did, but you saved him." Sarah returned the hug gently. "He's strong. He did the hard part," she said, though in her heart she knew how close they had come to losing him. The man stirred slightly, his eyes fluttering open for just a moment. His gaze landed on Sarah, and though he didn't speak, the faintest smile touched his lips before he drifted back to sleep. Sarah stood by his bedside for a few more minutes, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart monitor. It was the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. As she left the hospital, the cool night air hit her face, and for the first time all day, she let herself breathe deeply. She thought about the thin line between following the rules and doing what's right. Sometimes, in the space of a heartbeat, you had to choose. She knew there would be whispers in the halls tomorrow, debates about whether she was reckless or heroic. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that a man would get to go home to his family, because for one critical moment, She had trusted herself, and she'd do it again, every single time.